What's up? What's up? What's up? Today we are going over Module 4, Lesson 1 on percent. So the aim for today is that Kipsters will be able to, convert between a fraction, decimal, and percent. Key point number 1 is a quick reference guide. Let's read through these, but you're not going to know these or learn these just from reading them. We're going to need to do quite a few practice questions, which we have in our notes today. So just to read through this quickly, to convert from a percent, what you're going to do to get to a fraction is divide by 100. From a percent to a decimal, you're going to move the decimal two place values left. To convert from fraction to a percent, you're going to find the equivalent fraction that has a denominator of 100. Or for a fraction to a decimal, you're going to use long division. From a decimal to a percent, you'll move the decimal two place values to the right. And from a decimal to a fraction, you're going to just choose a denominator. This might seem like a lot of ideas. Really, to me, these are in pairs. So there's a pair, and you can link these up on your notes if you want. From a fraction to a percent, if you think about equivalent fraction, that's just saying like, hey, if you have, let's say, a fraction of 1/2, and you can write this in your notes, 1/2 equals, well, what's the equivalent? X, some number over 100. That'd be your equivalent fraction with denominator 100. Or, hey, okay, you want to get to a decimal, use long division. Okay, these are all things that you already know how to do. You just have to figure out when they're useful. So 1/2, look, it already tells you this means 1 divided by 2. So to get a decimal, we do long division, 1 divided by 2. Okay, there's another pair of strategies here, these two, because if we have a percent and we want a decimal, we move our decimal place. Or if we want to go the other way from decimal to percent, we move our decimal place. And you're going to see several examples. So those are kind of just opposites of each other. And let's draw a line for this last pair, okay? So if we want to get to a fraction, either from a decimal or a percent, well, okay, if it's not a fraction, we need to make it a fraction. Because we had a percent, we'll divide by 100. And if we have a decimal, we're going to choose a denominator, and you'll see some examples there. But if you think about these in pairs, I think it makes it a little bit simpler to think through these strategies. So let's begin by comparing percentages with fractions and decimals. If I have 37 and 5/10%, what is my fraction? Well, I need to use my strategy, divide by 100. So this would be 37 and 5/10 divided by 100. And that's it. Now it's a fraction. How about for a decimal? Well, to get to the decimal, we need to move the decimal two place values to the left. So I'm going to rewrite my 37 and 5/10. And then this is a percentage of 37 and 5/10. So I want to move this decimal to make the number smaller, because percentage means this is 37 and 5/10 out of 100. Move the decimal place two place values left. And now I can rewrite this as 0, and this isn't my math vocab, but 0.375, okay, 0.375. And in math vocab, that would be 0 and 375 thousandths. Okay, let's move to one more example, and then you'll do a couple of practice questions. So 100%, we want to get to a fraction. What's our strategy? Good, we're going to divide by 100. So we have 100%. Let's divide by 100. Okay, we're done. That's our fraction. How about for a decimal? Well, 100%. Where's the decimal? It's right here. So we move it 2 to the left, and we have 1.0, or in math terms, we would just say 1. That's our decimal. Go ahead and solve for this part of your notes. Do the next two practice questions now. Awesome. I'll go through these quickly. You should have 110 We divide by 100. Okay, we could do the next one is 1%, divide by 100. For the decimal, we have 110. Decimal would be here. I move it 2 to the left. I get 1 and 1/10. And then here I have 1. The decimal would be here, so I move it 2 to the left. And now this open space is going to require a 0. Okay, so this is going to be 0.01, and in math vocab, that is 1/100th, or 1/100th. Last one. You might recognize 1/2 already as a decimal. If you do, you can write that here. This would be the same thing as saying 0 5/10%. Okay, but what you could do is still just write this over 100. So 1/2 over 100. Now you have it as a fraction. If you prefer to have 5/10, then you could say, hey, this is the same as 5/10 over 100. Great. Now, we can't move the decimal place for this fraction very easily, but by converting to 5/10, we can move the decimal place 2 spots to the left, and remember we got to fill this open space with a 0, and this will give us 0.005. Don't leave out that second 0. Pay really close attention. And of course, in math vocab, we would say 5 thousandths, because the 5 is in the thousandths place. Great. Let's move on to the next page and some more practice questions. Okay. What we're going to do is fill in this chart, and then you're going to get a chance to do the same thing on the right side and check your work. So we're going to convert amongst all three: fraction, decimal, and percentage. So let's see, how do we go from percentage to fraction and decimal? Well, we've already done that, so we will start there for practice. 350%. Okay, I want to move this to a fraction. So I'm going to say this equals 350. And if you want to check the front for the strategy, you can. The strategy says let's divide by 100. Okay, there's a fraction, and you can write that in if you want. But we can simplify. Let's think. What goes into both of these numbers? Well, 10 goes into 350 and to 100. So if we divided the top and bottom by 10, we would have 35 divided by 10. And we could do this again. We could simplify again. And if you simplified by 5, the top would be 35 divided by 5, which is 7. The bottom would be 10 divided by 5, which is 2. This is equal to 3 1/2 if we want to write this as a mixed number, because 2 goes into 7 3 times with 1 left over. So there's a variety of fractions you could put here. I'm going to use the most simplified form because I think that is a good way to practice. So we have 3 1/2. Now we need to also convert 350% to a decimal. So in 350%, let's think the decimal would be here. I move it 2 places to the left, and it would be right there. So hey, my decimal is just going to be 3 5/10. I'm going to draw a little line here. Our next one will convert from this decimal to a fraction and percent. So we have 0 25 thousandths. It's the way we would read this because it's 25 in the thousandths place. So hey, you could write this as 25 thousandths. What strategy did we just use? Well, we just went from a decimal to a fraction. And our strategy said for a decimal to a fraction, choose a denominator. We chose the one that had the place value where our number was, 25 thousandths. We can just write this as a fraction, 25 thousandths. Now you might say, hey, Mr. Carver, we can simplify that. You sure can. Let's see. If we divided by 10 on top, I would get 2 5/10. Divide by 10 on bottom, I would get 100. You can use either of these. I'm going to use 2 5/10 over 100. Now let's get a percent. Okay, I already have my decimal, so to get to a percent, I'm going to move my decimal 2 place values to the right, and I'm done. So that becomes 2, it's kind of a sloppy 2, okay, 2 and 5/10 percent. How about this last one? We need to convert from our fraction to a decimal and to a percent. So we have 1/8. Now, look at your strategy for fraction to decimal. What are you supposed to do? Good, you need to use long division. So I have 1 divided by 8. How many times does 8 go into 1? Well, it doesn't. It's 0 times, but we can still do long division. Our decimal would be right here. It would move straight up, and I have to add a 0. How many times does 8 go into 10? Well, okay, it goes in 1 time. 8 times 1 is 8. We subtract, you have 2. Add a 0, carry it down. 8 goes into 20 2 times. Okay, 2 times 8 is 16. Subtract, you get a 20 minus 16 is 4. Carry a 0. 8 goes into 40. How many times? 5, which gives us exactly 40, and there's going to be no remainder. So we use long division, and we said 1/8 is the same as 0 and 125 thousandths. Okay, and when we write it out, it's going to look like this. 0 and 125 thousandths. Now, as a percent, since we already converted this to a decimal, let's just go ahead and say, hey, we can move the decimal here. So if we move it 2 places to the right, it's going to be between the 2 and the 5. So this would be our new number with the decimal here. And we would say, hey, this is 12 and 5/10%. So what I want you to do now is, and I would even mark off my paper to make space here, you're going to use the same strategies that we used on the left to solve for each of the practice questions on the right. Fill out the table and check your work against the key. Okay, so now you can check your work against the key on the right side. And there's just one point that I want to make. We didn't use the equivalent fractions for the fraction on the bottom on the left, but here on the right, I want you to take a look at this note. So to go from 1/4 into our percentage, what we did is we said, hey, 1/4 is the same as what number over 100? And to go from 4 to 100, we multiplied by 25. So to find x, we would also say, hey, okay, 1 times 25 would give us 25 over 100. So 1/4 equals 25 over 100, which means 25 per 100, which is the same thing as saying 25%. So here we went from 1/4 to an equivalent fraction with the denominator 100 to our percentage. We did not do that on the left because 8 does not go neatly into 100, so we went to a decimal, then to percent, and really you can use whichever fits your fancy as you solve this type of question.